Hello, in today's episode, I channel my inner Luke Towan and flip a bottle. I wave my hand over a car, and I left my project in the oven for too long. But jokes aside, if you want to see how I got here, stick around and let's find out. So much like my last two builds, we start off with a styrofoam base. This one's just glued to a scrap piece of OSB plywood that I had laying around that I then just cut the styrofoam to its shape. And then from there I went on to my standard process at this point, which is the homemade sculpted mold mixture just applied to the base, just covering the contours and kind of shaping out the road that's going to be in the center of this build. With that done and me finishing off the edges and patting everything down and smoothing it out how I wanted it, I then moved on to embedding plaster rocks. These rocks were cast from Woodland Scenics rock molds. These are just leftovers I've had from various projects. I like doing this when this is wet because it helps everything adhere better. I also pile on a little bit more of that ground texture around the rocks. To me, those rocks just sitting on the ground kind of just stands out a little too much and kind of like burying them a little bit. And here you can kind of see what I mean by burying the rocks just a little bit. It kind of makes it look a little bit more natural, and I just ended up outlining the berms on the sides of the road to kind of like define the shape a little bit better. Once the base was dry enough, I covered it with burnt umber. This is to prepare for the dirt texture that we'll be applying next. This really is just to make sure the white plaster doesn't come through the spots we somehow miss. And as I said, now it's time for the dirt texture. The first step is applying a watered down Mod Podge mixture across the entire surface I want my dirt texture. With the glue down, we then now move on to applying the dirt. I use a paint can lid with dirt in it and a stocking wrapped over the top, and I just shake and sift it directly onto the glue. You know, what I'm looking for really is the fine dust that's coming out of this. I don't really want all of the dirt to just come rushing out. It looks a little weird at this kind of scale, so again, just that dust, and you dust it over until you get the coverage that you're looking for. Once you're happy with the coverage, we now need to secure it all in place, so we spray on isopropyl alcohol and even more watered down Mod Podge. With the glue down, we can now move on to applying more texture to the ground. To do that, we're using these little stones which I had sifted from my dirt in my backyard when I was making the dirt texture. So to start off, there's really no rhyme or reason as to where I'm placing these. I'm mainly focusing them at the base of each of the rock outcroppings, just kind of like fill in the space a little bit more and blend the rock outcropping to the dirt. And then I'm going to move on to putting them around the road, mainly focusing on the berms, on the sides, and a little bit in the center line. Now with the rocks mostly in the areas that I want them in, I'm going to go over it with a brush just to thin it out in a little bit of spots and help control it a little bit better and feather it just a little bit here and there. Once I was happy with where the rocks were, I then applied isopropyl alcohol and yes, even more watered down Mod Podge. So with the ground dry now, we can now move on to static grass. So to start off, we're going to stipple on some Mod Podge straight out of the pot, and we're just going to go for a nice thin layer in the areas we want. I'm just going to focus on showing you guys this lower right hand section, but the same applies for everywhere you will see grass later on in this project. This first layer is Woodland Scenics 4mm grass. I'm starting with 4mm because I want tall grass this time, and I'm going to go for some good even coverage across the whole section. So yeah, I'm going to turn it over and hold my applicator about 1 inch or 1 centimeter off the top of the glue and just lightly shake it over it until I get the coverage I'm looking for. And you're going to repeat these steps again and again until you get the kind of coverage that you're looking for. And hopefully at the end of it you'll get something that looks a little bit like this. So This is a blend between 4, 7, and 12 millimeter grasses. I kind of wish it was a little bit thinner in some spots here and there, but overall I'm pretty happy with the coverage. I think it came out pretty good. And then, as always, you could leave it here, leave it with these natural colors, or you could do something a little bit more interesting. I did it again! Thanks, evil me. So yeah, I decided to paint it black, or prime it black. Some of you may think, why? And fair enough, I just like the control I can get out of it. So to get some of that color back, we're going to start off with XF67 NATO Green, and I'm just going to cover all the grass. With the NATO Green now down, I then added some XF4 Yellow Green to the mixture to try to lighten it up for those more mid-tones of that grass. And here we're just aiming for more of the middle of the blades of the grass all the way towards the top, and trying to avoid the base of it. With more of the mid-tone now established, we can then move on to doing some of the highlights. In this case, I used XF60 Dark Yellow. Being a highlight, we're going to be focusing towards the tops of all the grass. You could spray an entire tuft if you wanted to, if you're going for like a dead or a completely dry look. I don't show it here, but I also added a little bit of white later on just for the most extreme highlights in certain reserved spots to help push that contrast even further. At this point, I was happy enough with the grass, so I then moved on to doing the dirt, to which I then used XF52 Flat Earth as the main base color. This will eventually get covered over with a highlight layer, so I'm mainly focusing on the recessed areas, the more shadowy areas, the more areas that would contain a little bit more moisture, and avoiding the grass when possible. As I said, once the base layer was down, I then used XF78 Wooden Deck Tan as a highlight layer for all the drier areas and the raised portions. After having applied the highlight, I looked back at the grass and I kind of wanted to change the color a little bit. So I went back with a NATO green and a little bit of yellow green, and I kind of brightened it back up. Wanted those mid-tones coming through a little bit. I thought it was a little too dark. I think it came out okay. I think it's a little bit on the radioactive green side, but I don't know. I'm pretty happy with it. After brightening up the grass, I then moved on to building and making some fine leaf foliage bushes, which I then placed in the grass and along the rocks. After placing the bushes, I then went on and painted the stone and rock outcroppings, and also picked out the small little stones I had placed earlier, just picking a few here and there along the road and at the base with various gray colors. Painting the little stones actually is a super relaxing process. If you haven't done it, you should try it. And that little bit of effort gives you a huge result at the end. Again, all those stones are there, just painting them a little bit of a different color just helps them really pop. After painting the stones and rocks, I moved on to building and placing some pine trees that I had made. These trees are made with some wooden dowels and furnace filter material that has just been painted and layered with some ground foams. This was the first time I'd ever made pine trees. I think they came out pretty good. I still have the full process of me building them, so if you guys really want, I can make a video about that, but let me know. So now with the trees in place, I needed a way of blending and hiding the hole that was left, so I used some of my sifted dirt and I built it up around the base. And then I forgot to show it, but I also added some crushed up leaves that I got from my backyard, just blended up and put that on top and glued it all down with isopropyl alcohol and Mod Podge. To set the scene, I had a leftover 3D printed car and some jerry cans that I wanted to use as kind of like the main focal point of this build. And the paint job was nothing fancy, just something whipped up pretty quick. It was the first time I'd ever tried painting glass. I think it came out okay, but I don't know. After placing everything where I wanted, I channeled Luke Talon, I flipped my bottle, and I gave the base a coat of black paint. And with the base painted black, that marks the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, I first started making these videos just to document and track my own progress and keep a record of my builds, but I'm glad some of you guys are really liking this stuff, and I hope to see you guys around. So until then, I'll see you guys next time.